good to see you again.
Hello.
I haven't seen you in person for so long.
Yeah.
Anyway, I watched your videos on Habit Project.
How was it?
Your story. Oh my goodness, so good. You know, stories like this, no matter how many times you hear it, it's almost as though you can find something new about it. So it's so good to hear both of you share.
I totally agree with that. And actually, for the videos that is in the 6 minutes that we have, it's not enough for us to tell our stories. I think that's what we are trying to do today, to have conversation, to actually really talk about the issues of surrounding the abortion.
Yeah, I really hope that this conversation can debunk some of the myths that people think about abortion, as well as also for us to share more about what we went through and how God came in to save us.
Absolutely. So as of now, we still know that 1 in 7 pregnancies in Singapore are aborted.
I think contrary to popular belief, right, I think the percentage of abortions done by women under the age of 20 is only 6%.
Yeah, that's
which
right.
was very surprising because many people would think that abortion is a teenager issue.
Totally. Yeah. And it's also not just a single woman issue, because now it's about more than 52% are done by married women. And actually, in the earlier years, like in the 70s and 80s, the percentage was almost 90%, of married women. So there's so many women and men and families who are hurting from this, and it's so important for us to talk about it.
A lot of women that I've spoken to who are contemplating abortion, they think that life can go back to normal. They think that their relationship with their spouse or with their boyfriends is going to be the same. But that's actually not true, because after going through something so life-changing, how is it that the relationship can remain the same? I mean, at most, they just pretend that nothing happens, but underlying that, the relationship is just being affected.
When I was 17, I thought that having that abortion will forever solve all the problems that I was facing. And the abortion did not solve my problems. It created more problems. Right now, the open conversation and the healing that I have received solved the problems. My family is now better. I'm a much more whole person. And that journey of healing in God actually solved the problems. It wasn't the abortion. Yeah.
What about,
I also
I'm curious about Jensen.
That's true. Yeah.
I was a 17-year-old student, right? And then I knew that something was wrong already. I was already 5.5 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And didn't know what to do. I remember after school that day, I just walked in the housing estate and I kept telling myself, the first clinic that I see, I will just walk in and check what's wrong with me. I saw that first GP clinic, went in, and how likely is it, right? Because usually GP clinics don't have ultrasound machine, but that GP clinic had an ultrasound machine.
Oh, wow.
He made me lie down, and first thing the doctor did, scan me, and he said, "Oh, you are pregnant." Wow, my world spin, man. It really I just felt like fainting. And I was already 22.5 weeks. So the baby, you could obviously tell, very formed, the heart was beating very strongly. And the only thing I could tell my doctor was, I need an abortion. Please, please. I begged him. This doctor actually was very sympathetic and compassionate. I can still remember that you could tell even that he was struggling with what to say, because he knew that here I am, a 17-year-old student, right? And I'm so late in already. But yet, ethically as a doctor, he needed to give me the professional advice. So I begged him, and he very reluctantly wrote a referral letter to me, and I went. And this doctor, when I went in, just was very, very cold in that sense. He just said, "Okay, you want okay, okay, so this is the appointment. You just don't eat too much, you don't." And I asked him how much it is. Then he just told me, "Oh, if this procedure is this much, is this procedure is this much, law. Any other questions?" No, I honestly didn't even know what I was going to go through until the next day when I went for the appointment. And to my horror, I realized that I was going to be induced because I was already 22.5 weeks. And I went through 8 hours of induced labor and gave birth to a dead baby. And I didn't know that was how it was going to be done. But it was too late. You reach a point of no return. the doctor didn't tell me. Maybe he did, but I wasn't listening. So I think that first encounter with the doctor or with whoever you speak to can really make or break. And when I think back now, the person who actually could have helped me a lot was that first doctor.
But you didn't tell anyone.
Only my ex-boyfriend knew. Nobody knew. Nobody.
Do you see the baby?
No. I pushed out the baby. The doctor announced that it was a son. He asked me, do you want to see him? I said no. 8 hours of labor. I was exhausted. I was out of myself. And then I heard the crumpling of newspaper. And then they said, okay, get dressed and come out when you're ready. So everyone left the room when I gathered all the strength I had to stand up and change. And at the corner of the room, I saw a heap of newspaper, and I instinctively knew that was my baby. And I can still remember that visual. Yeah, I write it in my book, I describe it. And I think that it's important that these details come out because no one knows what goes on behind the abortion doors.
That's right.
And at that moment, the greatest thing that left me was my dignity. I lost all dignity. I lost all respect for myself. I walked out of that clinic that day, like a part of me died, physically died. And that's why my life never got better, got worse. It didn't bring life. There was so much death in all that. I lost so much. And that's why I say, why would anyone think that abortion would solve your problems? It wouldn't.
Yeah.
And we know this firsthand, right? Yeah, so that was my first experience.
I think the abortion day was quite a blur for me. Like I cannot remember the things that went on before that or who was in the clinic. I was knocked out and then I just went through the entire process. When I woke up, right, I just wanted to get out of the place. But also at the same time, I was actually bleeding a lot. So the doctor actually put a tampon in, but it wasn't enough. So I had to go and buy pads and there was a lot of fear like, why am I bleeding so much? Because I didn't know that I would be bleeding so much. Yeah, and I guess that whole day I was just trying to pretend that nothing happened. I was just going through life as normal. So I went back to my ex-boyfriend's house and then we were having a barbecue some more. But I think the impact came when I lie down on my bed, and that was when I couldn't pretend anymore. When in that silence, in that quietness, the thoughts of what did I just do? And all the pain just started to gush out of me. And I wasn't even expecting it. I didn't know that it would be so hard. But every single night when I got home, right, I would just cry myself to sleep for so many nights. Like it was for 1.5 years, and I was just shocked. How come the pain did not ease? It remained the same or it got even worse. And that was when I realized time cannot heal at all, and only God can.
I remember I was actually bargaining with God. If I could, I don't want to take the pill. And it's a lot of back and forth like in my mind, because choosing in between a baby and I don't know what the future is going to like, and versus an ex-boyfriend that I thought is going to be my husband. So I decided to just take the pill lah. And I didn't sleep much that night. And in the morning, I remember I saw blood actually coming out and stream down my thigh in the toilet when I went to the toilet. Yeah, so it was quite scary. But at that moment, I kind of knew that my baby is dead lah. So similar like your experience, I felt part of me had died at that time point. Then I just went through the entire process like without even talking to my ex-boyfriend, and we just drove all the way to the clinic. I remember when I woke up from the anesthesia, all I wanted to do is is I want to run out from there. Right after that, then I went to America to actually do my research work. So it was, I have to put up a front, like, oh, this is great, you know, with abortion, the problem kind of solved. But when night time comes, it was so difficult. When I'm alone, all alone in the country, and when my ex-boyfriend at that time broke up with me, so my entire world just crumbled. So that's when my mind, right, starts to go to this fantasy land that I created. So it's like an escapism. Sometimes I cannot differentiate what is a reality and what is my fantasy land. It's very strange. Like we wouldn't associate abortion with this, but that is the kind of impact that it has on our emotion and mental side.
It's very, very common to hear women share their experiences. While the details may be different, but the emotions are more or less the same. And what I find very interesting is how, for a woman who is planning to go for an abortion, most of them would focus on asking questions about physical pain. And I meet many women who will tell me things like, I can deal with the emotional pain. It's just the physical pain that I'm afraid of. And I look at them and I'm like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. So the truth is the physical pain will pale in comparison, right? And we all know this first-hand experience. The shock and the horror of what have I done? And the fact that I cannot undo it. And the fact that no one told me it was going to be like that. And that pain, that guilt, that shame, that desperation is something that destroys us. And I think what is common too is that many of us and many of the women will fight to regain normalcy in their life. You going for a barbecue, you just, I want to run out of the clinic and never have to think about it. Me, I went back to school 3 days later. The normalcy of life will be a very strong coping mechanism because we will use that to justify what we just did. That you see, if I was still pregnant, I would never be able to go back to school. If I was still pregnant, I won't be able to have a relationship with my boyfriend like now. If I am still pregnant, I won't be able to go back to work. So we will strive to get back that normalcy, to justify what we just did. But at the end of it all, we know that we are just in great deep denial and we need healing.
I think one of the major steps towards healing is making that conscious decision to say that I'm not okay and make that decision to want to seek help. And I think many women that we have come across, they have that decision to want to seek help, but they don't have that determination to walk through the process. And many of them just give up halfway, you know. And I think going through that healing, it would be nice to have people supporting us and going through that healing journey together so that we can have that courage to confront the pain that we have been trying to avoid for so long.
But actually, I'm always very curious because I want to hear, like, how do you know when you're healed? Like, for both of you.
I think it's a process. Honestly, if you ask me, am I completely healed today? I don't know, right? Because sometimes God surfaces certain issues at different points in time. So I think in this whole healing process, there were certain points at which I knew that I got better. Like, for example, when I saw the vision of Jesus carrying my child, I think that was quite a defining moment for me. Or the time when the Lord said, go use your unborn child's life to propel the gospel forward. That, to me, felt like redemption.
Actually, it took a very long time for all the healing to take place, and I went through the professional counseling, and I did the book, Forgiven and Set Free. We process the emotions, we process the stages of grief, and process my guilt, my shame, and how do we actually arrive at accepting the entire incident and forgiving the people who have hurt us and forgiving ourselves as well. But of course, I think for me personally, I cannot take God out of the picture. So the healing comes from God lah, from going back to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, that was really the major areas for my own healing journey as well. And I realized that I could only forgive myself or forgive others was when I realized that God has forgiven me. That for me, that was the turning point. And it wasn't really even like I went into this session where I want to get healed of my abortion experience. It wasn't even intentional. Honestly, by that time, I was about my late 20s, I honestly thought that I will never be healed. And I was prepared to accept that this was going to be almost like a curse upon my life, and I would just have to deal with God when I die. And thankfully, God doesn't leave us that way lah. I heard God tell me that He loves me, forgives me, and that He's proud of me. And that set me free. And that kind of touched and triggered all the parts of me. My family hurt, my relationship hurt, the abortion, everything. And so I became whole. Actually, Ifan, I got a question for you. So you said that after you went to the States, then your boyfriend broke up with you. And was there any closure? I mean, did he break up with you because of what happened?
I actually stopped contacting him since then. And I went for counseling for 8 months. And actually, my counselor did prepare me, like if I were to see him, what do I say to him? Yeah, how do I actually want a closure? But it was interesting that she told me that, actually it's like forgiveness. You don't need another party's consent to be able to forgive the person. You can actually forgive. So it's the same thing as closure. You don't need him to be there and say, okay, reach an agreement and then you close. But you can actually close it, and I can close it with God. What about you?
I think my closure was a bit different. I actually had dinner with him. And actually it wasn't expected because I came back from New Zealand and I wanted to start Buttons, right? So I wanted to preempt him that, hey, you know what, I'm going public with this story, you better get ready. So that was my intention of meeting up with him. So for me, right, for many years I was very angry at him. I was so angry because, after the abortion, he told me that, hey, you know what, I think I should spend more time with you. And then shortly after, he just disappeared from my life. Like he just distanced himself away. And I was angry because, hey, this was what you said, and I chose you over our baby. And then you did this to me. So I was very angry at him for many years. But somehow when we had that dinner, I mean, I didn't even tell him that I was angry at him, but he told me that because of guilt, he couldn't face me, he couldn't face my parents, and that was why he distanced himself from me. And that was when I realized that he too was affected by the abortion. And to me, knowing that gave me that closure that I needed to have. Yeah, so I thought that was God's grace upon my life. It was His mercy.
So Jen, what was your closure?
I wasn't conscious of it, honestly. Like all of us, after the abortion, it's just like business as usual, go back to normal as fast as you can. But 4 months later, we broke up. And it was initiated by me. And I told him that I can't continue with this relationship because every time I look at him, I remember what happened. And he wasn't there for me during the abortion. He didn't pay a single cent for it. So I had a lot of resentment and anger towards him. And so I was the one who cut off the relationship. And for years and years and years, I refused to have any contact with him. And some healing only came much later, maybe almost 10 years later. And at that time, I was already in a very stable relationship. And then I got news that my ex-boyfriend's father had passed away. And much as whatever my ex-boyfriend had done, his family was always very kind to me. And so when I heard that his father passed away, I wanted to attend the funeral. And so I told my boyfriend then that I want to attend the funeral, but I'm afraid of going on my own. And so I asked if my boyfriend would go with me. So you try and imagine, okay, like if my boyfriend, right? First, I have to face up with the ex-boyfriend. Plus, this is like the ex-boyfriend's father's funeral. And he knew everything that had happened to me. And this amazing boyfriend, who is now my husband, said, yes, of course, without a doubt, without hesitation. He said, of course, I'll go with you. And so we went for the funeral together. And when we walked into the funeral parlor, my ex-boyfriend wasn't there yet. Just as we were going out, I bumped into him. So it was like, dun, 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 like the music, right? The drama, right? And at that moment was like, you could just imagine it was a slow motion, like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? We can't pretend, we can't turn around. And at that moment, I just smiled at him. And I didn't even need to say much. And I knew that this was the last time that I was ever going to hold any resentment towards him. I think what was helpful for me was I had the support of my boyfriend then, and the fact that I knew that my life has moved on. And like you said, the closure didn't need to be mutual. I don't know if he has resolved it, but I know that I have, and I need to move on with my life. And I didn't need to think about how he was doing since we were not together anymore. So that was actually a very powerful moment for me and my boyfriend at that time, who is now my husband, because that actually strengthened our relationship, and it made me admire my boyfriend then even more, that hey, this is really a guy I can marry, that he would do this for me. And he was so secure. And so, shortly after that, we got married. And we've been married for 18 years.
Wow, amazing.
Actually, I was curious. So John actually knows about the abortion.
Yes, right from the start.
Right from the start. And what was his reaction?
He very funny. So I decided that I needed to tell him everything about my life. So one day we just went to the food court, sat down, and I told him, today I'm going to talk and you are going to listen. And so I told him my life story for 3 hours nonstop. Everything, all the junk,
laundry.
yes, everything came out. But you know what? I was speaking from a place of fear. I was speaking from a place of, if he really knew who I was, would he still love me? And that's always been the refrain of my life since I was a kid. I always wondered, if people really knew who I was, would they still love me? And I carried that even with John. And at the end of the conversation, I told him that, I'm telling you all this to let you know that if you cannot accept any part of my story, you can walk away right now and I will not think any worse of you. Because I know that it's not easy to accept someone like me with a past like that. That was how I thought. And he looked at me like a bit blur, like surprised by my question. And he said, but that is your past. What I want is your future. Wow. Cue the Korea drama music.
No, good men does exist.
And this is real, And
Good men exist.
Yes, they still exist. They are real. They are real breed. And it's